Okay, so I'll read so that I'll be on time. And there will be a lot of maps, like every time when the territory I'm dealing with is concerned, so bear with me. The borderlands between southern, eastern, and central Europe were borderlands of three different empires: Habsburg, Ottoman, and Venetian. Habsburgs ruled the major part of Slovenian lands as their hereditary lands, while southern border of Hungarian Zala County encompassed Slovenian Prekmurje as well as Croatian Međimurje. Continental Croatia was incorporated in Hungarian crown lands with some degree of autonomy, while southern parts were respectively part of Venetian Republic and the independent Maritime Republic of Dubrovnik. After the fall of these two maritime republics and short French rules, these territories were incorporated into the Austrian part of the Habsburg monarchy. Bosnia and Herzegovina was a part of the Ottoman Empire until its occupation by Austro-Hungary in 1878 and its subsequent annexation in 1908. Jewish population in these territories was very diverse. Jewish community of Prekmurje and Međimurje was a Hungarian-speaking Ashkenazi community that settled in the Zala County. The Jewish community of continental Croatia was also an Ashkenazi community that settled there mostly from Western Hungary and Moravia. And all these communities were the result of Jewish immigration after Habsburg partitions of Poland with Russians and Prussians, as well as Jewish policies of Habsburg rulers Maria Theresa and Joseph II. The Jewish communities in the Eastern Adriatic, Split and Dubrovnik, were Sephardic in origin, but from the 18th century on, Ashkenazi families started to settle in Split and Dubrovnik respectively. The Jewish community of Bosnia and Herzegovina was of Sephardic origin, deeply rooted into the land since its 16th century settlement, and was concentrated in a few urban Ottoman centers. From the Habsburg occupation and subsequent annexation, there was an expansion of settlement to the whole country simultaneously with Ashkenazi immigration. Intensification of immigration of Ashkenazi families were as well seen in two coastal communities. Therefore, there were different Jewish histories, but also different Jewish groups present in these territories. By the 1918, these communities became one Jewish community of the Kingdom of Croats, Serbs, and Slovenes, and called Kingdom of Yugoslavia. And this is how then I'll use it in the future. The community was then organized in the Federation of Jewish Religious Communities of Yugoslavia, sharing one common future with communities of the former southern Hungary and the Kingdom of Serbia that included the Northern Macedonian Jewish community. So I know it's a bit of a long history introduction, but it's important then to follow its history further on. So this is how it looked from the Hungarian, from the monarchy part of view, and this is the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. On April the 6th, sorry. So what's also important to understand is how the communities were situated within the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. And here we can see that actually majority of communities were in Croatia, as well as former southern Hungary that became northern Serbia. And then on the far northern tip, it's this Prekmurje and Međimurje. So I don't know if I can point. No, I can't. Yes. So all the dots are Jewish communities. So we can see it's not spread, evenly through the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. And what we are going to follow today is the Slovenian community up top, where you see Murska Sobota, and then Međimurje, where you see Čakovec. It's far north. Then Croatia, it's on the top, and you can see Bosnia and Herzegovina. And actually, from the occupation of Austro-Hungary, the community spread throughout Bosnia and Herzegovina. Before that, we could talk about 3 to 4 communities. So now we are going to the Holocaust history. On 6th April of 1941, the Axis powers invaded Yugoslavia. After the Yugoslav army surrendered on 17th April, German, Italian, Hungarian, and Bulgarian authorities occupied and partitioned the country. The Shoah in these three countries was implemented in the context of German, Italian, and Hungarian Jewish policies. However, majority of the Jews in the region were affected by the establishment of the independent state of Croatia, that further on I will call NDH for the shortness of time. The Italians occupied and even eventually annexed part of Dalmatia, and Hungary annexed Međimurje. And we can see here it's Međimurje and Prekmurje. It's Hungarian occupation, and here we have part of technically Croatia today called Baranja, that we'll talk very briefly about it, and then the independent state of Croatia in brown, sorry. And then in dark gray up north, it's German occupation zone of Slovenia, and green is Italian occupation and annexation. Slovenia was partitioned by Germany, Italy, and Hungary. Jewish population of these respective countries found itself in very different circumstances. Ashkenazi communities in part of Croatia and Slovenia came under Hungarian control. Both Ashkenazi and Sephardi communities of Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina found themselves in the NDH, both in German and Italian zone of influence, while Split was annexed by Italy, and its mostly Sephardi community became a member of Federation of Italian Jewish Communities. So these geographies are very important of understanding the situation during the Holocaust. German troops entered Zagreb on 10th of April 1941, and after the leadership of the Croatian Peasant Party rejected the offer of the Axis power for establishment of an independent Croatian state, representatives of the Ustasha movement declared the independent state of Croatia on major parts of Croatia and the entire territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The NDH was divided by the demarcation line into German and Italian areas of interest, and both German and Italian troops had more or less free reign in their respective zones of influence, which covered virtually in the entire territory of the NDH. They were between 23 and 26,000 Jews living in territory of present-day Croatia. From them 10 to 12,000 in Zagreb, and up to 14 to 15,000 Jews in the territory of present-day Bosnia and Herzegovina, and from that number, around 8 to 9,000 in Sarajevo. If we talk about Ashkenazi and Sephardi, it's around 7,000 Sephardi Jews and 1,000 Ashkenazi Jews in Sarajevo. After the first weeks of its existence, the NDH authorities adopting the Nazi policy toward the Jews with a combination of anti-Semitic propaganda, racial legislation, registering and then confiscating property, killing Jews as hostages, burning synagogues, and desecrating Jewish tombstones started the persecution of Jews in their territory. The NDH introduced the first anti-Jewish measures already in mid-April 1941. On 30th of April 1941, three key anti-Jewish legal provisions, colloquially called racial laws, were published, and they defined who were the subject of anti-Jewish legislation that followed. Between April 1941 and October 1942, the NDH passed at least 30 legal provisions, orders, and other legal regulations and decisions at the state level and many more at the local level, which established the status of Jews in the new state, regulated the confiscation and redistribution of Jewish property, and broken Jewish communities as well as other Jewish organizations. These legal measures were mostly adopted in the first 2 months of the existence of the NDH. First mass arrest started in May 1941, and the first deportations started in the 2nd, 3rd of June, simultaneously with the German Reich attack on the Soviet Union. However, They were organized and carried out exclusively by the NDH authorities into different transit and concentration camps organized in the territory of the NDH. From summer of 1941 until summer of 1942, about 20,000 Jews from the territory of the NDH had already been deported to camps in its territory. In the summer of 1942, a new phase of mass deportations began, as they were coordinated for the first time with the Germans, with the Jewish section of the main Reich Security Office. During August 1942, the NDH authorities carried out a broad action in which the Ustasha and the NDH police participated in order to hand over most of the remaining Jews to the Germans. A total of more 5,000 Jews were deported, mostly to Auschwitz-Birkenau. After these deportations in October 1942, the NDH authorities nationalized Jewish property. At the beginning of May 1943, the second wave of deportations to the east started. This action provided for the deportation of about 2,000 people in small groups in wagons added to regular trains. Representatives of the NDH promised to deport 1,500 individuals, and then in the end, they managed to deport 1,200. These final deportations ended the existence of the Jewish community in the NDH. After that, German officials considered the Jewish question, quote unquote, in the NDH solved, with the exemption for Jews in mixed marriages and those with much needed skills in the private sector and administration. So this is the first part. The Italian-controlled territories in Croatia and Slovenia would be the second part of this presentation. After the April War, with the collapse of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, Italy occupied its parts, namely in Croatia and Slovenia. Italy annexed certain areas along the Croatian Adriatic coast, and we can see it better here. It's in purple. And now to go back to follow the whole territory. The fate of the Jews who found themselves or fled to areas occupied or controlled militarily by the Italians in 1941 was different, as anti-Jewish measures were less severe. According to various estimates, they were 4,000 to 5,000 Jews who fled to Italian territories. After the annexation, Split became part of the Kingdom of Italy, and the Jewish community in Split became a member of the Federation of Italian Jewish Communities. The Split Jewish community was a hub of Jewish self-help for numerous refugees from other parts of occupied Yugoslavia, as well as for pre-war Jewish refugees from the territory of German Reich. The Jewish community in Dubrovnik, part of the Italian occupation zone, but nominally with the civil administration of the NDH, has been helping Jewish refugees since the 1930s, and like Split, had an increased number of Jewish refugees from Yugoslavia since the April War. Those Jews who took refuge in the Italian occupation zones of Slovenia, the NDH, or the area annexed by Italy were not exposed to physical destruction, but the Italians tried to transfer the Jews who entered the annexed area of the coastal part of the NDH, which were under the control of the Italian army. So the embassy of the Kingdom of Italy in Zagreb sent a verbal note to the NDH Ministry of Foreign Affairs in August 1941 not to allow the emigration of Jews to Dalmatia and to the Kotor province, it's Montenegro, and to consider the possibility of the return of Jewish refugees to the territory of the NDH. In addition, from the end of 1941, the Italians started to establish camps for foreign Jews on their home territory. So now we have Jews of, I'm quoting, ex-Jugoslavo di origine croata o serbo, then Poles, Germans, which means German and Austrian Jews, Hungarians, Bulgarians, Czechoslovakians, and Romanians being put in Italian camps. During 1942, the Italian authorities transferred most of these Jews to their native Italian territory to camps or open internment. From August 1942, the Germans tried to get Rome to hand over those Jews who were in the coastal area of the NDH, which was under the supervision of the Italian army, to the NDH authorities. In September 1942, the Italian military commands reported that there were about 3,000 Jews living in the areas under their control in the NDH who were opposed to extradition, so Italians avoided it with various tactical maneuvers. As a concession to German pressure, on 28th of October 1942, the Italians decided on the internment of Jews from the parts of the NDH under their supervision in camps on the coast of the Adriatic Sea and implemented this decision in November and December of 1942. From March to May 1943, the Italians transferred all the Jews to one camp, Campor on the island of Rab, and it's very hard to point. It's in the northern part. It's not the most northern, but a bit below. And it's the green because it was the island that was annexed by Italy. Just a second, because now... where from March of 1943, already Slovenes and Croats, mostly from partisan families, were placed. The treatment of Jewish internees was far more humane than that of Slovenes and Croats. Now, the third region is the whole Slovenia, both Italian and the German occupied. In the last pre-war census of population of 1931, there were 344 Jews living in parts of Slovenia occupied by Germans and Italians. Shortly after the German arrival, most Jews from the German-occupied Slovenia retreated from the persecution to Italian zone, namely to Ljubljana. In the end of August 1941, over 400 Jewish refugees from German-occupied Slovenia, as well as Jewish refugees from the German Reich, were located in Ljubljana, with an increasing number of Croatian Jews who were fleeing the NDH toward the Italian zone of Slovenia. They were trying to reach territory of Italy proper, and only minority remained there after the capitulation of Italy in September 1943. After the German occupation of Italy, anti-Jewish persecution and deportation started, and deportations from the operational zone of the Adriatic littoral affected most of the Jews that remained there. The majority of Jews arrested in Ljubljana in 1944 returned from the concentration camps, as well as those who had fled to Italy. Finally, the last zone that again is referring to Hungarian occupation zone, and then includes both communities in Slovenia and Croatia. So here we have this disparity of different geographies. Is Prekmurje and Međimurje. Jewish settlement in Prekmurje and Međimurje region can be dated in the first half of the 18th century. And until the end of the 19th century, the number had already increased to almost 1,000 in Slovenian part and 1,000 in Croatian part. But after the end of the First World War, it diminished because of the anti-Hungarian sentiment in the new founding kingdom. This is why I asked you a question about the post-First World War emigration. According to the last official population census in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, only 476 Jews were left in Prekmurje in 1931, while Jewish sources quote around 800 in Međimurje. Hungary, like Italy, had anti-Jewish legislation prior to the outbreak of the Second World War. And after the numerus clausus for the Jews back in 1920, Hungary promulgated two anti-Jewish laws, one in 1938 and the other one in 1939. And then the compulsory labor service was established for Jewish men as well. Finally, in 1941, the Hungarian government promulgated the racial law, very similar to the racial laws of the Nazi Reich from the 1935. And this is now the context of Prekmurje and Međimurje community. After the Hungarian occupation and annexation since 1941, anti-Semitic Hungarian laws have been implemented in this territory as well. In March 1944, after the German occupation, the situation rapidly worsened when the Hungarians introduced stricter anti-Semitic laws. The decision to arrest Jews from southern Hungary was made on 19th of April 1944. The action started on 26th of April and lasted for 5 days. After relocation to temporarily ghettos and expropriation of property, Jews from Prekmurje and Međimurje were transferred to Načkanjiža and from there mostly to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Baranja Jews, and that's the northeastern tip of Croatia that shares the destiny with the northern Serbia, were deported on 28th of May 1944, also to Auschwitz-Birkenau. The estimated number of surviving Croatian Jews is between 4,000 and 5,000. According to some estimates, it was as high as 5,250. Around 4,000 Bosnian Jews survived. So altogether, from 9,000 to 9,500 Jews in the entire territory of the NDH in a lower estimate, as high as 12,000 in a higher estimate. When we talk about who survived where, we have survivors who were in partisans, 2,339 given to the whole NDH. We don't have separate estimates, and around 4,000 of Jewish refugees that survived in Italy. In Slovenia, they were around 100 survivors because the community was small. And to conclude, and it's actually only to opening some of the research I'm trying to do, and it's still in progress. There were 3 historical lands and today's independent states included in this survey: Slovenia, Croatia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Only Bosnia and Herzegovina and 2 Dalmatian communities had a Sephardic majority. As a rule, each respective community's fate followed the pattern of occupation zone or collaborate state in which they found themselves. So as a rule, those Jews situated or escaped to Italian and Hungarian zone of occupation survived, confined or not, until the capitulation of Italy and German occupation of Hungary. Then they followed the fate of Italian and Hungarian deportations respectively. As Prekmurje, Međimurje, and Baranja Jews were part of Hungarian province, they were deported, so not the center, but the province. They were deported among the first, and the survival rate was low. Some of the Jews escaping to Italian zone reached Italy proper, be it by Italians or by themselves, and upon the capitulation of Italy, moved towards southern Italy. They were 4,000 Yugoslav Jews. We don't have national separation at this point, that survived in Italy. Another way of survival was to join a national liberation movement or to be a refugee in the territory controlled by the national liberation movement. The Jews in the part of the NDH in German zone of influence were hardest hit already in 1941. Here we can follow different dynamics of mass arrests and subsequent deportation and differentiate between province in a way and the center, but just partially. Almost 2/3 of Bosnian Jews were deported to NDH concentration camp system, while a bit more than half of Zagreb Jews were. So we can see different dynamics. But it was not only about the province versus center. As Osijek example shows us, and this is the city in the eastern Croatia, and here we can see it on the border with annexed by Hungary on northern east, and it's the second largest center in Croatia. Jews were a balance in a complexity of a multinational city where Croats, Germans, Serbs, and Jews and Hungarians lived. So they were hardest hit, quote unquote, only in summer of 1942, when majority of community was deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Sarajevo is yet another example, and it's the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it's just above the demarcation line, precisely of the multinational character of the city, where the Jews were deported among the first. This is now the research that at the moment I'm doing. So it's in a way a conclusion, but it's also opening the other research questions. So thank you for your attention.